So in previous classes, we have learned what is comparative literature and how the comparative literature started its journey at the initial stage of literature. And we've seen several historical important things relating to comparative literature. Today, we will try to identify the term, that is the comparative literature, how comparative literature, the term came into existence. Okay, that means how comparative literature came into being. And comparative literature comparative literature, the term came into being in such a way that in 1816, a collection of French poems entitled Cours de littérature compare, in which the term comparative literature was mentioned in relation to teaching literature in French. It means that in the history, comparative literature, the term came into existence with the publication of a collection of poems, that is the French poem. So you can say that the comparative literature, the term came into existence with the publication of French literature. Actually, the French comparatists, actually French writers, they use that term in terms of teaching French literature. In that way, we can say that the French school of comparative literature is the first school of comparative literature in Europe. Okay, so they say that course de literature compared, and in such a way, comparative literature came into existence. And it is also said that this French collection of poems actually they started their journey, that means the comparative literature journey, in a way that they want to teach French literature, especially the French poems. And so the comparative literature came into existence. And in this regard, we have to mention Czech American comparative literary critic, and his name is René Welleck. You may see his picture, image. That means he discussed the origin of the term comparative literature and notes that the title actually, whenever it came into existence with the publications of French anthologies, René Welleck said that yes, they have used the term comparative literature first, but actually, what does comparative literature mean? So this Czech American critic, he said that the term cannot be explained, or we can't understand totally well what does comparative literature mean. And René Welleck said that actually the comparative literature came, he showed how the term came into use in 1820 decades to 1830 decades in France. So René Welleck admitted that comparative literature, the term came into discussion with the French publication of anthologies, but the term cannot be explained, and the term doesn't mean many things. And this is his position. And René Welleck suggested that the German version of the term, actually, after the French version, we have seen another version of comparative literature, that means the term comparative literature. They said that that means German version of comparative literature, Germans said that Vergleichende literature Geschichte is a German word. And the first appeared in Moritz Carrier book in 1854. So after French, so French writer used the term in 1930 decades and 1920 decades. After that, in 1820 decades and 1830 decades, and after that, 1854, we have got the German term, and they Actually, that term was used in Moritz Carrier's book. Here we have got this term, the comparative literature. And the earliest English uses attributed to Matthew Arnold, that we have told it in the previous class, that at the time of the lecture, Oxford University, Matthew Arnold used the term comparative literature, and he did it in 1848. So that is the term comparative literature used by a German critic, first the French critic, and also the Matthew Arnold in his lecture. Okay, so in such a way, comparative literature, uh, the term came in the discussion of literary arena, and it involves that the literature will be compared beyond the national boundary, beyond the boundary of a country. And in such a way, the term comparative literature started to come into discussion among French critic, German critic, and Matthew Arnold, an English poet. But the term we know that will be comparative literature out of the national boundary. And comparative literature is derived from a methodological process applicable in science, in which comparison and contrast are being used as a means of confirming a hypothesis. It means that many critics said that comparison naturally is appropriate for scientific investigation. In case of scientific investigation, that a hypothesis, that means imagination, as assumed decision is taken, then with the assumed decision or the hypothesis is tested by comparison. And in such a way, comparison might be quite effective for science. How comparative literature can be effective for literature? They put the question, that is, what does the comparative literature mean, and how and which way we will be comparing one kind of literature to the other kind of literature, in which way we will be comparing one language literature to other language literature. Actually, that's initial comment put by Susan Basnet, that means a comparative literature, in his book he has mentioned. Here we get another critic, a French critic, and a man of letters. Actually, his name is Philarete Schall. The spelling Chasles, but pronunciation will be Schall. So Philarete Schall, in 1835, in Athens, he gave a lecture, and at that lecture he used a term, that is literature étrangère compare. That means in French word, the meaning foreign literature compared. So Matthew Arnold commented that point in 1848. In France, they used the term in 1820 to 1830 decades. In German, they used the term in 1854. And here, this French critic, he used the term in 1835 and tried to locate the object of study in comparative literature. Actually, here we have seen that means comparative literature can be applied perfectly in case of scientific investigation. How it will be applied in case of literature? That question was answered by Philarete Schall in his lecture. He said that the term, let us calculate the influence. Most probably you may see the leaden word, that is influence. Let us calculate the influence of thoughts upon thought, the manner in which the people are mutually changed. What else of them has differed and what else of them has received? Let us calculate also the effect of this perpetual exchange upon the individual nationalities. So Shal in 1835 answered the question that what would be the activities of a comparative literature? What would be the wage of comparative literature? So in this regard, this French critic Shal, he pointed that influence of a literature is the main thing. Influence of thought, influence of, he said, influence of what? He said that influence of thought you will be putting. Suppose you might be influenced by someone's personality, you might be influenced by someone's character, you might be influenced by someone's ethnic background, poems, and like that. So here, one kind of thought might influence others. So in that way, influence will be a cheap way of in comparative literature, according to this French critic Charles. He has put an example. That means Charles has put an example. So what kind of influence and what kind of thought that will be influenced and that will influence others? Here he said that Shah has made an analogy, that is, the France has two parts of this world, that especially the northern part was isolated for a long time. That means in France, southern part and northern part. These two parts are not linked together. France southern northern part was isolated for a long time, and finally we have observed that this very northern part allowed itself to be influenced and penetrated by the spirit of the southern part of France. So this uh, northern part is influenced by the southern part. Southern parts, which aspect, especially the spirit of southern part. Actually, we may compare, putting an example like uh, in Bangladesh. Actually, if you see that Chittagong is a port city, so here you will see so many business things will be there. Okay, but if we come over in Dhaka, there you will see it is a cosmopolitan cities. Here you will see people from all districts, but in Chittagong, you will not see people from all districts. So the profession, career, everything, people come to Dhaka to achieve their career, to fulfill their career. But the way the Chittagong doesn't think so. In the Chittagong people, they are working in several port cities, several ship breaking and ship manufacturing uh, yard in such a way. So here, like Bangladesh, we see that the northern part of France was isolated, that France was not developed, and actually that part of France was not quite developed one culturally and from the economic perspectives and the other perspectives. So after a time, the northern part was influenced by the spirit of the southern part. So Shal taught such kinds of thought and such kind of influence of literature, culture, anthology, and others. And that influence is the basic tenet of comparative literature, according to Shal. So in this way, we can say the French is the initiator of comparative literature. They use the term first, and the French critic Shal, he has put the term, that means in which way and what portion of a literature will uh, be compared. He said that the influence of thought of a literature will influence the other literature of other part of a country or even other part of a world. Okay, so that is an example. And secondly, Shall also put another example. He said that England was influenced by the magnetic attraction of the France and vice versa. We know that England and France are two countries situated side by side. And we have seen several struggles. Once upon a time, France defeated England and occupied the power of England. And England several times tried to occupy France. Okay, so um, In such a way, the French spirit, that means the French spirit of struggle, French spirit of stamina, influenced England. In the same way, England, that means the people of England. And in the same way, England strength and the England's power in several fields also influenced France. So uh, that is we can say that England was influenced by France and France was also influenced by England. Which thing then means the spirit of what? Spirit of culture, spirit of economics, spirit of science and technology, spirit of business and commerce, many things. Okay, so these are the part of influence. These are the tenets of influence. Thirdly, through the ebbs and flows of the political history of Europe, we have observed that each part of Europe one time dominated its sister states and another time submitted to them. As I have said, that sometimes France occupied England and sometimes England occupied France. So that was the scenario in the Europe towards 18, 19, 17, and 16th centuries. So many European countries tried to occupy the power of the neighboring countries. So that was the political situation of Europe. And fourthly, the theological Germany. So artistic Italy, energetic France, Catholic Spain, Protestant England influenced the other European countries in many different ways. So we have started our lecture in such a way that French critic started using the term comparative literature first, and next time another French critic shall he put that influence is the key tenet of inspiration or influence. And what are the influence? That is the spirit. What are the spirit? That means the spirit of Germany, that they are theological. The spirit of Italy, that is they are very much artistic. And the spirit of France, that they are energetic. The spirit of Spain, that they are Catholic in religion. And the spirit of England, they are Protestant in many ways. So this is their spirit. And this is a spirit. We have said that we can also remember that Goethe said that literature is a result of an ideology. And also Homike Bhava also said such kind of thing, that it is a place of ideology. So theological Germany and their literature will be the showroom of their belief and ideologies. And again, the artistic Italy, they will show their art in literature, and vice versa. The French, they will show their mighty power, and the Spanish literature and will show Catholicism, and English literature will show Protestantism in their literary pieces. So such kind of literary genres will influence others. That is the term we can understand by the term influence and spirit. And such kind of influence and spirit can influence other and can be compared in comparative literature. William Shakespeare's profound analysis was duly possible for the tremendous influence of the warm shades in Charles' work of the southern part of France. Okay, in previous class we have discussed that William Shakespeare was borrowed many things from the French folktale. And here Charles also said that actually William Shakespeare's writings and the story and many things were influenced by France, and especially the French folklore, French anthologies, French history of struggle, and many things. So in such a way, literature can be the place of putting some country's ideology, beliefs, liking, disliking, art, and artifact that we have seen in case of William Shakespeare's writing that William Shakespeare was tremendously influenced by France. So again and again, we see that the comparative literature will be comparing the influence of spirit, influence of thought, influence of some other thing. Milton Catholic belief was adorned and embellished by the Roman and the Italian spirit and influence. William Shakespeare was influenced by France, and also Milton. Milton was very much Catholic in his presentation or in his writings. And how was he influenced? Milton was influenced by Roman and Italian spirit to be a Catholic writer. And his Catholicism we see, and pagan belief we see in his writing, and in which way he has got such kind of spirit. He was influenced, that means Milton was influenced by Roman and Italian literature. And the attraction, the sympathies, and the constant vibration of all this living, loving, exalted melancholy and reflected thoughts, some spontaneously and others because of study. Okay, how did William Shakespeare got that influence? Critic said, Charles said that this may get in two ways, either from study, or another way we can get spontaneously. When two countries will be in where? When two countries will be living side by side, we can understand the ideology of our neighboring country very easily. And if the other country's ideology is rich enough, then spontaneously the neighboring country will be influenced the writer, as it happened for William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare was spontaneously influenced by French ideology and culture. So that influence works in two ways. Spontaneously, a people of a country can be influenced by the other country's ideology and spirit, and vice versa. He can read the literature or the ideology or the spirit or thought of a country, and that he can get influenced by his or her reading, all submitting to influences, which they accept like gift, and all in turn emitting new unforeseeable influences in the future. Yes. So getting influenced by two different ways, that means spontaneously or by reading. Next time, that influence will make a person put their literature in a quite good way. That means if a person is influenced by a country's literature, whatever may be the ways, spontaneously or by reading, next time the writer or the critic will try to write literature based on his or her previous influence, and that is natural in comparative literature. So the word influence in the previous slide gets recognition as an important characteristic in comparative literature. Charles refers also to the spirit of a nation or of a people that suggests how spirit may have influenced another writer in another culture. It will be always a spirit of a nation like that, not like that. Even a writer can also influenced by a person's personality, the means of a people. And this is the way the influence and spirit will work on the literature of other part of a country or the other parts of the world. So spirit and influence is the basic tenet of comparative literature in its initial journey. That means in its initial journey, comparative literature, the term started with French literature, the French critic, they mentioned it, and next time they talked about influence and spirit. And we have nicely presented that what is spirit or what is influence, and in which way they have influenced others. So Charles paints an idealistic picture of international literary harmony. So if it is so, shall put an analogy, that is the relationship, the linkage among European literature, European countries first, and the European literature as well. So in such a way, a literature of a specific country is not isolated. A literature of a specific country is a production of influence, and that influence will always be getting from the own country, not like that. That means in the neighboring countries, from the neighboring countries, that spirit will be there and the literature will be produced. Historical reality of a nation to nation is different, but the mutuality of influence and connection are same. Okay, so history, many countries will have different kind of history. Okay, so geographical boundary, watery boundary, and business, politics, science, other things. So that can be the identification of a country. But the thing is that the influence will always be natural. Influence will go spontaneously. It is not like that you will put a barrier, you will put a bank, and you will carve the influence. So when a literature will be produced, so that literature will influence others spontaneously. So that is same, and every time such kind of influence will work on literature. So the term comparative literature was first originated in France by the comment of some French critic, we can say. So our target was that how the term comparative literature came into existence. The answer is that the term comparative literature came into existence with the comment of some French critic. They said in such a way in 1820 and 1830 decades. And they have also pinpointed the characteristics of comparative literature, especially René Wellek put a comment that actually the term doesn't mean many things. And for this reason, this French critic Charles in 1835, he said that actually influence of thought, influence of spirit is the way of comparison. That means how a literature will influence others. We can also say that French thought of comparative literature is mainly pinpoint different kinds of influences and are derived from culture, religion, sociology, anthropology, art and architecture, and warfare and friendship, etc. So how a country will get its spirit, that means cultural spirit, religious spirit, social spirit, anthropological spirit, architectural spirits, and warfare and friendship. So that spirit will be the term to influence others. Another part here, see, that's probably we will be finishing today's class comparing these two terms, culture and nationalism. Charles, again, French critic Charles, he said about the idealistic picture of international cooperation in comparative literature as a means of literary influence is only the one side of a coin. So influence is the one side. We find completely different phenomena of the cultural exchange of the other side of the coin. So yes, so influence can come from religion, sociology, and anthropology. So shall come up with another thing, that is the culture. Actually, Shal said that influence will pass spontaneously, and many person can be influenced by reading. But what about culture? Cultural exchange will be happening simultaneously, and cultural exchange will be done just like the flow of a river. We can curb the flow of a river, and in such a way, culture of a country will be exchanged with the other culture, other countries' culture, and it will done spontaneously. And here, regarding the alternative perspectives of cultural exchange, so French critics they started their journey with the influence. The basic tenets of the French comparative literature is influence, and another thing the Shall pointed that is the cultural exchange. And here, Lord Byron, in his preface to Prophecy of Dante, commented that the Italians with pardonable nationality are particularly jealous of all that is left them as a nation. Their literature, and in the present bitterness of the classic romantic where are but ill disposed to permit a foreigner even to approve or imitate them. So nationality, if any country's people love their country uh, well. Actually, it is not like that. Actually, every people of a country will be loving their country. It is natural. But the people of Italy, they showed their nationality in such a way that they love their country very much. And so the nationalistic attitude will be in a country's culture. That means in case of a nation, we will see that everybody or every person will love his or her country, and that is the nationality. And nationality depends on the identification of language and culture. So Lord Byron commented this. That means we can praise Italian for their love of nationality. Byron observed that the close relationship between national identity and cultural heritage. So when our own ethnic culture, so love of nationality especially comes from the love of their own inherited culture. Okay, how do we follow a culture? We follow a culture, we say that such kind of tradition, such kind of activities we are following from our time immemorial. Okay, in the old Dhaka, you will see they will be uh, observing the ceremony that is the Posh Sankranti. So it is their culture. They have inherited from their previous generation. So nationality and cultural inheritance go side by side. So nationality will be strong because the every nationality or every country will be following their inherited culture. So there is a linkage between national identity and cultural inheritance. If we see that if you visit European countries or America, you can easily be identified observing your culture. They will say that you are from Asian. That means in Asia, there is a cultural identity. From Asia, there is a cultural identity. From Africa, there is a cultural identity. And every specific country in a whole, they inherit a culture from their previous generation. So nationality and culture, that two things go side by side. Byron observed that situation. He recognized that a nation or a series of small states, as Italy was then, was struggling for independence and jealously guarded its literary heritage against all comers. Okay, so Italy, what did they do? Italy, the people of Italy, they have said that yes, this is my literature, this is my culture. In this literature, I have seen this. So, which is my literature? Actually, in which literature we have seen my culture? As you can see, that Peter said that actually literature is the thing where we see the ideologies. So, in such a way, Italy guarded their culture, guarded their literature in another way. Okay, so that is their position. So, two kinds of influence here Byron identified: borrowed influence and stolen influences. Both work for a matter of perspective in comparative literature. Okay, so borrowed influences, naturally, the inherited culture always will not be uh, the broad culture. Actually, people of a country will will follow some culture that they have inherited. That is their own ethnic culture. Other than they may borrow, the country may borrow a culture from a neighboring country, or they might have stolen the culture. So, two kinds of influence are there in case of comparative literature: borrowed influence and stolen influences. So, whatever may be the category of the influence, influence is a perspective in comparative literature, and that is started with French comparative literature. Regarding the influence of other literature, translated literature played a vital role. So we have started with influence, then went up to spirit, then we went up to national and culture, then we have come in the place that is translated literature. So translation is also a way of in influence. In which way? That means Czech literary revival of the first half of the 19th century. Vladimir Makura calls it a politics of translation. As translation has played a key role in patterns of influence in comparative literature. And Vladimir mentions a voluntary revolutionary scholar and patriot, Joseph Jungmann, who claimed in the language of our nationality in uh, 1846. So here we are in the translated literature. Jungmann found translation as a significant part of developing new Czech literature. So, how translation can play a vital role in the revival of literature, Jungmann put an example of it here. He argued that the origin of a text is less important than what happened to the text in the process of translation. Okay, so origin, after the translation, the text will get a new identity. And for this reason, origin is not important. Rather, after getting translation, how this literature will influence other, that is important, that Jungmann put in his comment. Translation into Czech was a process of enhancement, a means of extending the range of language and of emergent literature. Actually, someone said that it is a politics of translation. So through the translation, a literature will get extended. That is Jungmann said. That is, when a literature will get translated, through the process of translation, the literature, the original literature will have an enhancement. If our text remains in its original language, it will be there in an isolated place. When a text will be translated, then the translated text will influence other people, other culture, and other literature as well. And for this reason, translation can be seen, it is not a way of deteriorating the original text. However, translation can be seen as an enhancement of the original text, as an extension of original text. That is put by Jungmann in his comment. So translation can also be a part of comparative literature. In the 19th and early 19th and 18th century, immense literary turmoil throughout Europe, as well as an issue of nationality increased, linked to cultural development. So in the late 18th and early 19th century, many European countries are pinpointing their boundary. That means they are struggling for their freedom, and many of them got freedom, got independence at that time. So there was a turmoil situation all over the Europe at that time. And when the country will be in a struggle for their freedom and identity, their notion of nationality, their notion of unique identity will rage. So in the late 18th century and in the late 19th century, many countries were struggling for their freedom. So in another way, we can say that many countries were struggling for their own identity. So that happened in Europe in the late 18th and 19th century. So nation engaged in a struggle for independence and also for the cultural roots. Okay, and for a national culture and for a past. Okay, so that is the identity. Actually, cultural root is a country's identity. That means what sort of culture they have inherited from their past or from their previous generation. Emergent nations have to establish a tradition and a canon. So when a country will get independence, then that country will say that this is my culture, this is our culture. We have inherited from past, we have inherited from our previous generation. And the most extraordinary example of such roots is the forced medieval manuscripts observed, discovered by Va, Va, Vaclav Hanka, Vaclav, Vaclav Hanka. Hanka and his colleague, they say they have discovered a old Czech manuscript. Hanka and his colleague, they said that they have discovered some manuscript. Actually, these manuscripts are from Czech Republic, and they said that these are from uh, 9th, 10th, and 13th centuries. So they have discovered this manuscript, and they claim, Hanka and his colleague claim that this is our past literature. This is our previous literature. That means they say they wanted to say that, oh, have you seen that in the 19th, 9th, 10th, and 13th century, the Czech people produced so many good literature after getting such notion in their inspiration. What did they do? They announced that there had been a golden age of Czech poetry at the time, and while the rest of Europe was struggling with decayed epic form, so European countries, the other countries, they were trying to claim that the epic form, that means the long narrative poem, they were established. So they claim that they have their epic, but Hanka and a colleague, his colleagues, said that yes, we have a long inherited cultural we have a culture that we have inherited from our past. That means in 9th, 10th, and 13th century, we have produced so many important manuscripts that are produced by the Czech writers. After getting such kind of influence, ah, to Czech literature. And within a century, Czech had been seen to be a major European language. So when they were influenced that, yes, we have a glorious past in terms of literature because we have an anthology of poems in our literature. So the Czech literature was flourished and Czech became an important language in Europe. So for such kind of influence, Czech language was influenced and Czech culture was influenced and also the Czech literature was influenced. So uh, uh, this kind of influence is a part of comparative literature. But interestingly, next time it was proved that it is a fraudulent manuscript. Actually, the manuscript discovered by Hanka, actually, this is not the Czech manuscript. This is actually the forged or fraudulent manuscript. But whatever may be the situation, influenced by this fraudulent and the first literature, Czech literature was influenced and the Czech culture was influenced. Inspired from this fraudulent old manuscript as tradition and the glorious past, the 3 volumes of Slavonic national songs were published in 1822 and 1827. 5 volumes of History of Bohemia appeared in 1836. And in the same year, the greatest poet of the Czech Romantic Revival, Karel Macha, published his major poem, May. So how does influence work? This is an example that getting influenced by a forced literature, Czech literature was influenced and Czech culture was influenced. So this is what will be happening in comparative literature. So assisted by the forced medieval manuscript, Czech was desperately trying to establish a cultural roots as a desire to nationalism, as a culture of as a time of ongoing cultural and political struggle in Europe. So here that is actually we have said how nation and culture go side by side. So after getting influenced by the past, the Czech literature and the culture was influenced, and this is the way we have seen that nationality was improved and also the cultural identity was improved in all the parts of Europe. Same tendency of looking back to a glorious hidden past was also shared by several nations throughout Europe. Mid 18th century onwards saw immense interest of publishing folk songs, poetry, folktales related to national roots. Why? Because as I have said it earlier, that is throughout the European countries were struggling for their independence and their cultural identities. When they were trying to pinpoint their cultural identity and national identity, they are trying to publish the folk songs, poetry, and folktales based on their own culture, not from the other culture. So folk song, poetry, folktales are the roots of our culture, and that will also be compared in comparative literature. Percy's Relics of Ancient English Poetry appeared in 1765. The great Danish poet Johannes Ewald published significant collection of ancient sagas and medieval ballads in 1771. Herder's Steamer Den Volker in Leder, published in 1778. Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm's fairy tales in 1812 to 1813. Ellis Lonrod's version of the Finnish national epic, that is uh, Kalevala, in 1849. So throughout the Europe, when they are influenced by nationality, when they are influenced by their cultural roots, so many literature was produced. So we have started our lecture in such a way that the influence will be a main things. And in Europe, you have seen that the cultural influence and the national influence put them that many writers produced many great literature at that time. This fascination with the past, as well as the developments of the literary history, philosophy, archaeology, and the political history, was directly linked to the general European questions of the definition of nationhood. So, what is the definition of a nation? Nation, that means a certain number of people living in a sharing a same boundary. It not like that. It like that nationhood will always be putting its roots, that means the cultural root. What is their philosophy? What is their archaeology? In such a way, nationhood will not only dependent on boundary and a large number of people, but nationhood will be rooted in cultural roots, the anthropological roots, the archaeological roots, and the cultural roots, and the roots to folk tales and the folklores. These are the inherited and this inherited culture, and through this inherited culture we can identify a nation, we can identify a national culture that we have seen all over the Europe. Rousseau talked about the collective personality of the people, and regarding this, Timothy Brenner points out that in Germany, Herder transformed Rousseau's people into the Vogue. So we have talked about folklores and folklores, fairy tales. Rousseau called it Vogue, not folk. Okay, so that is folk. The significance of this later concept is its shift from Rousseau's Enlightenment emphasis on civic virtue to a earlier romantic instance of the primordial and elu- ineluctable roots of nationhood as a distinguishing features from other countries. So if people now set off by the national characteristics of a new natural characteristics of a language and the intangible quality of a specific folk gist. So Rousseau called it a folk again. So national will go, that is for his cultural roots and the identity of a nationality, that Rousseau called it a folk or folk taste. So the idea of cultural heritage that is sprang from the people, from the genuine, authentic voices of the collective upon which the nation was based, and was the powerful one in the age of revolution that swept Europe. So that is not all emergent nations invented their own non-existent medieval literature, but it is significant that the archaic text which caught the public imagination right across Europe was translated into a huge range of languages and was also a forgery. James Macpherson's Fingal also appeared in 1762. So not original or not forced. So when a literature will be translated in several languages, many persons of many countries will be influenced in their own way, and they will try to produce their own literature influenced by this literature, thus heading to the past tradition and the culture, next time translated in many languages through the forgery, though in forgery inspired nationalism all through Europe. So this is the way the term comparative literature came into existence. That the French critic, they called this term, they started this term in 1820 and 1830 decades, and after that another critic, Schall, pinpointed that influence is the basic tenet of comparative literature. Through the influence, we can understand the literature of other parts. And next, third, what is the influence? Influence of religion, influence of anthology, influence of architecture, influence of art, and influence of culture. Next time, we see that spirit of struggle, spirit of friendship, thought of friendship can also be the way of comparison in comparative literature. So the term comparative literature started its journey through the with the comment of some French critics. So in this regard, we can say the term comparative literature started its journey with the comment of some French critic. So French comparative school is the earliest school of comparative literature, and they have talked about influence. Influence of what? Influence of culture, influence of art, influence of architecture. And next time, for the influence of art, culture, and literature, we have seen that in European countries, many countries had been struggling for their national, for their freedom. And when they were uh, struggling, many European countries are struggling for their freedom. Actually, they are establishing, they are struggling for their cultural identity, for their cultural inheritance. That means what is in the past. And by putting some example, Schall has shown that the Czech manuscript influenced the Czech literature next time, and with that literature, Czech language become one of the famous languages in Europe, and Czech literature in this well. And next time we have seen the translated literature. After getting translation, a literature will get a new shape. Many persons say that translation is one kind of deviation from the original text. So we should study the original text. But according to comparative literature, translation is not a deviation of the original text. Rather, translated works will be influenced by other people spontaneously or by reading. Many people can influence from the translated text, and in such a way, the literature of other country will also be influenced. So that is the term competitive literature came into existence, and competitive literature in such a way get a very important place in the history of literature and culture, in the history of nationality and culture, and that is all from today's class.